Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Return to UCF Virtual Conversation. My name is Stephanie Blanco, your Student Government Vice President.
And I'm Joe Harrington, Professor of Physics and Faculty Senate Chair.
Together, we are your moderators today for our panel that includes UCF President Alexander Cartwright, Michael Johnson, Interim Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs, Elizabeth Klonoff, Vice President for Research and Dean of the College of Graduate Studies, Rhonda Bishop, Vice President for Compliance and Risk, Joseph Trubask, Interim Chief Financial Officer, Misty Shepard, Interim Vice President of Administration and Finance, Mary Beth E. Haas, Vice President of Student Development and Enrollment Services, Kent Butler, Interim Chief Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity Officer, Maureen Binder, Associate Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer, and Tom Cavanaugh, Vice Provost for Digital Learning, and Michael Dyken, Associate Vice President of Student Health Services and Principal Medical Advisor for the university's response to the pandemic.
Thanks, Stephanie. We'll start with a brief overview of the draft plan from President Cartwright. And then Stephanie and I have put together some general clarification questions that we'll ask the panel. We got these from prior meetings, from the Faculty Senate ad hoc committees, and from student government. Yes, the panelists have received these questions in some form yesterday and in final form about an hour ago. So please forgive us if it sounds a little bit scripted. The goal here is to get some high priority questions answered and to clarify things. And then in the final section of the forum, we'll open it up to everyone listening and watching on Zoom. So there's a Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom window. Use that to ask questions, and you can designate who the question's for. You can also upvote questions. So if you see someone has already asked a question that you're interested in, you can upvote it, and we'll give preference to the upvoted questions, followed by questions in the order they were asked. We will skip upvoted questions if they've already been answered or if they're off topic for today. There may be some more straightforward or specific questions that may be passed over and answered in the Q&A window, and you'll find those in the Answered tab. We are simulcasting on UCF's YouTube channel, so if you're hearing from colleagues that they're having trouble with Zoom, you can direct them there. And they can find the direct YouTube link at events.ucf.edu. President Cartwright, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Stephanie. I truly appreciate everyone being part of this today to learn more about our return to campus and our university's plans for the fall. First, it's important to start with an acknowledgement of what a challenging time these past few months have been, and particularly the last several weeks. I know that many of you, whether you're students, faculty, or staff members, have been working very hard to do your best under very trying circumstances. Each of you are dealing with added emotional, personal, or financial stress because of the pandemic, and issues of racial and social injustices that weigh heavily upon us right now. I see the longer hours that everyone is putting in, while many also are juggling increased family or parenting responsibilities, or adapting to new ways of learning in a virtual world. This, no doubt, creates a difficult time. It's also a time that requires more empathy and understanding. We must remember that we are in this together, and we need to take care of each other. Good planning, like what we will talk about today, is necessary, but compassion will be needed for us to successfully execute on this plan. So many of our nights are demonstrating this every day, and I want to thank you for your commitment to the community and to each other, even in these challenging times, because that's truly what we need the most. I'll start with an overview of our planning efforts, acknowledging the work of many people who have put this together to date. Everyone who is part of our emergency issues and crisis response team, as well as the faculty, students, and staff who have served on our different planning groups, along with our healthcare and emergency management officials. I also would like to thank the thousands of you who shared your feedback with us, either through the virtual town halls or the Student Body Advisory Committee survey, or by sending an email. All of your input makes our plan stronger. While what I'm sharing today is the product of many voices and perspectives, and it continues to be refined as we receive your feedback through the end of this week. Our Board of Trustees will vote on our final plan next Thursday before the Florida Board of Governors reviews each university's plan later this month. If you've not had a chance yet to read the plan in its entirety, I encourage you to visit our Return to Campus website. We'll put the URL on the screen at the end of this presentation along with other resources. Slide 2, please. Taking care of each other is what matters most, and the health and well-being of our entire campus community guides everything we do. That includes creating a plan with a phased-in and flexible approach that can adapt to new conditions or guidance from state and local health officials. We each have a responsibility to help care for each other's safety, and that will be critically important as we return this fall. I'll talk in a moment about some of the ways each of us can do that while working together. We also know there is not a one-size-fits-all solution for every person on our campus. And that's why we must be mindful of individual situations, especially those who are at risk and should continue to work and learn remotely. Our HR department will work with supervisors and employees as more staff return this month, and departments will do the same with each faculty member returning this fall. Slide 3, please. Before I dive into details, here are the headlines from our plan. We anticipate returning this fall with limited capacity, with increased safety and cleaning measures in place. We will go fully remote after the Thanksgiving break to avoid many people who've left the area returning to campus. We will continue encouraging at-risk individuals to work or learn remotely. We will utilize virtual participation for courses, administrative operations, and many student activities. And we will conduct targeted testing of campus populations, as well as utilize an app and other ways to screen and provide information to our campus community. Slide 4, please. There are several important milestones on our journey back to campus. Last month, our facilities and housekeeping staff performed a deep cleaning to help prepare for some of our employees' return to campus. Our researchers began returning to their labs last month, and many staff returning in June. On July 1, we will communicate to students which courses and sections will be offered in person and online. We know many students are anxious to find out the latest on their courses, and that information will be final on July 1. Then our faculty will return for the fall semester on August 8th, and a phased-in on-campus move-in approach for our student residents will happen over a 2-week period leading up to August 23rd. Our first day of fall classes begins August 24th. Slide 5, please. This slide shows the different topics that our planning groups worked through. Rather than go through each, I'd like to focus on some of the most popular questions we've heard from you and how we will address them. Next slide. What will return to campus look like? So what will the experience be like this fall? It certainly will look much different than it has in any past semester. It will be different because we are taking extra precautions to protect our campus community. We know some of you are eager to get back to campus life and student activities, while others might want to learn or work remotely for longer. Our planning takes into account everyone's best interests as best we can and relies upon the changes we must make together to not just promote individual safety, but the health and well-being of all of us. Next slide. How will we decide classes? We serve an academic mission at our core and must do our best, regardless of the pandemic, to ensure our students have the highest quality educational experiences and are able to stay on track with their studies. That's why so much of our attention is focused on the learning experience this fall. Together with Provost Johnson, our colleges have worked to identify how our courses can best be offered, following both health and safety guidance, and of course, good educational pedagogy. This included reviewing every program and looking at which courses had the greatest need for face-to-face experiences, such as senior level design classes or performing arts as examples. They also identified courses in which a high-quality online experience could be offered by a fully trained faculty member. And we prioritized on-campus classes that are typically needed for first-time in college students, where we know the on-campus experience is critical for student retention and student success. On July 1, students can access My UCF to see which of their courses are being offered online, face-to-face, or in a blended mode. And you should expect to see a mix of each, with many courses offered remotely. Because of our talented faculty, UCF is known nationally for its online learning programs, and we are committed to providing our students the best experience in every modality. We will continue training our faculty this summer to deliver their courses online using the appropriate pedagogy for online, and will help them to be flexible in their curricula should health conditions change in the future. Next slide. We've had a lot of questions about extra cleaning. Our facilities teams have been working very hard on new cleaning protocols for the campus. This includes both deep cleaning and more frequent cleaning of our common spaces, including bathrooms, elevators, hallways, and stairwells. Moving forward, all common areas and high touch point areas will be cleaned twice per day, along with a deep cleaning of bathrooms. All classrooms will be cleaned daily prior to classes beginning and also disinfected every 2 weeks. UCF has ordered an additional 1,200 hand sanitizing stations, touchless devices in our bathrooms, and plexiglass dividers in public-facing areas such as front desks. Facilities also is taking measures to address ventilation and filtration of our HVAC systems to help reduce the risk of airborne concentrations. While the team is committed to following these new cleaning procedures, it also will be our responsibility to each do our part. That includes wiping down individual workstations or desks after use and in between classes to not only protect your own health, but the safety of others too. These individual actions will go a long way toward protecting our campus community. Next slide. As part of our phased-in approach, we began with 30% capacity limits for our buildings and office spaces. We will continue to increase to 50% or more as August approaches. Our classrooms will look different as well, with reduced capacity for all face-to-face courses. We also will keep encouraging virtual options to avoid unnecessary gatherings, like continuing to use Zoom for office meetings and virtual advising visits. For programs where physical distancing is not possible, such as our clinical training, students and faculty will follow additional health protocols, like wearing personal protective equipment. This information will be shared directly from the departments to those affected. Next slide. Another way we will help to take care of each other is wearing a face covering inside all common areas or when you are in close proximity to others. Wearing a mask helps those around you while helping you from getting sick and spreading it to others. We've ordered 100,000 reusable face masks for every student, faculty, and staff member to be distributed at locations at all UCF campuses. We'll share more information about how to get yours in the next few weeks. We've also ordered another 125,000 disposable surgical masks that can be given to contractors, temporary workers, and campus visitors, as well as others that are coming to our campus. These will be provided to building liaisons for distribution upon request, and more will again be shared with these individuals soon. To help us in both communicating and enforcing the university's new face covering requirement, we pulled together another work group of faculty, staff, and students that will look in part at inclusivity and cultural aspects of these changes as we return to campus. This group will also develop guidance on how to respond in situations when individuals are not wearing face coverings and determine how to best ensure that our enforcement is equitable, which it must be. Next slide. Many of our efforts will be around community education to help people adjust to this new normal, to become a part of our culture, at least in the immediate future. We will require training before any faculty or staff member returns to campus, and similar training will be developed for students before they return as well. We also are developing a new university policy to document these measures, including face coverings, and to provide clear communication on how we will enforce them. This is part of a larger push to help hold each other accountable and to socialize norms that we'll need to be taking together as a community. People will have opportunities to correct their behavior, but disregarding these measures will result in consequences and disciplinary actions that follow our regular processes. Slide 12. As I've said several times, the steps that we each take individually are not just to protect ourselves, they are to protect those around us. As Knights, we need to take care of each other. These messages of protecting our community will be communicated widely, with help from SGA and our university's social media channels, but we also will ask our campus leaders, whether they're faculty, administrators, student leaders, or student athletes, to be ambassadors and help model these new norms. Next slide. A successful return to campus will depend upon a system of both robust testing and tracing. UCF currently has 2 testing sites, one on our main campus and one at our health sciences campus in Lake Nona. We know that access to these tests will be critical as we bring more people back to campus. We will not be requiring every person who returns to campus to be tested. Not only are we a community of nearly 100,000 people, but we also live and are immersed in a major metropolitan area. Instead, we will employ targeted testing for specific populations: students returning to on-campus housing, students and staff residing in Greek housing, and all student athletes. We also will require testing for all students, faculty, and staff members who are symptomatic. Next slide. In addition to testing, the university plans on a robust contact tracing and medical symptom surveillance program in partnership with local health officials to help track infection of the virus. We will use student volunteers beginning this summer to help with contact tracing measures. The Department of Health will continue to notify UCF of all known or suspected cases at the university, and anyone who may have been exposed because a colleague or peer tested positive will be notified directly and provided next steps on quarantining or testing. Next slide. One of the most important pieces of advice is that if you feel sick, or if you suspect someone in your home is sick, take care of yourself first. Stay home and communicate to your supervisor or your professor. At UCF, we have resources such as emergency paid sick leave that employees can now use through the end of the year for COVID-19 related reasons. Thanks to the incredible generosity of our campus community, more than 100,000 hours were recently donated to our Knights Care Leave Share program, which employees can apply for after they have exhausted their other leave. Again, compassion and understanding will be key for supervisors working with their employees. We will need to remain flexible, adjusting to this new normal, and follow any guidance that changes if we see health conditions deteriorate in the future. Our academic leadership team will continue encouraging faculty to be flexible with their students too, who we will also know that if any of them need to quarantine this fall, we will adjust for that. If any of them have any other disruptions in their coursework, we will try our best to ensure that they are able to complete their course. We're encouraging faculty to make their coursework available to students virtually for those who choose to be remote or who need to because of health reasons. And what about research? Next slide. Our research enterprise drives UCF's intellectual engine. And already so many of our faculty and their students have been working towards solutions for the challenges from COVID-19. UCF's researchers began returning to their labs late last month with enhanced procedures that focused on physical distancing, health checks, and regular cleaning. More information for our faculty researchers and their labs is available online. Next slide. So much of the attraction of coming to college is campus life and building community. That's what is so special about UCF and our student body. We know the pandemic means campus activities will look different this fall, but we will work together to find new ways to build those communities, grow as individuals outside the classroom, and leverage technology to help keep us together. To encourage physical distancing, university-sponsored events and programs will be held virtually whenever possible. We are working with our fraternities and sororities on what their virtual recruiting will look like, along with helping other registered student organizations find new ways to adjust their fall plans, while still creating events and activities that engage our entire community. Creativity will be key here, and I know that our student body will rise to the occasion, and we will be here to support them. Along with many of you, I'm anxious to know exactly what our fall sports will look like. We will continue to follow guidance from our state officials, as well as the AAC and the NCAA. Our athletic director, Danny White, and I, of course, hope that we will be able to share more with you soon so that we can best support our Knights. Next slide. Lastly, I'd like to address the changes to our on-campus housing for this fall. Our campus student housing will open in August, but with reduced occupancy. Our housing team will be sharing more information with residents in the next 2 weeks. All residents will be tested before moving in. And if a student should fall ill during the semester, we are setting aside spaces at Northview, Union West, and Rosen Apartments for UCF housing students who need to be quarantined based on availability. We know there are a lot of changes for our students, and we also recognize how important it is for you to be back on campus. That's why we are looking forward to bringing you back in a way that provides a meaningful campus experience while keeping your health and safety a priority. Next slide. Finally, I want to leave you with a few resources. The first is our new COVID-19 email for you to continue to provide your input. The others are our university's coronavirus website and a special page about our return to campus, where you can find this plan, as well as updated FAQs and more information. Next slide. Joe, now I know you and Sabrina have a number of additional questions for me and others, and I hope this at least gave a helpful overview, but let's certainly hear what's on your mind. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Cartwright. So we've got some questions, and the first one is considering returning to remote teaching, what R-value or mask compliance percentage or number of cases or number of hospitalizations or other quantitative parameters would trigger such a decision?
So this is a very technical and complicated question for the first one. And for this, I really do need to ask our medical professional to talk about R naught and what that really means and how we will use it in our assessment moving forward. Dr. Dyken.
Sure. Hi. So it is a complex question, and I don't think there's an absolute number per se. We're going to be tracking the case rate of new cases here on campus. We're going to be tracking the influenza-like symptoms that we see in our Student Health Center and UCF Health. We're going to be doing targeted surveillance to look at the prevalence of the virus on campus. But it's a changing scene with regards to the epidemic, and we'll have to monitor hospital capacity. If people are hospitalized, need to be hospitalized, are there beds available? We have beds reserved on campus for persons that might be in need of isolation or quarantine. Certainly, if that bed threshold was being challenged, that could be an issue. But any of these issues will be in discussion with the Florida Department of Health. We have a close working relationship with them, and certainly under the guidance of the Board of Governors as well. And so it's a relative answer for a complex question. Depends where we are in the epidemic and what our capacity is to handle the COVID challenges that we have on campus. But the underlying ideal is that we want to be as safe as possible and make sure that we do have capacity to carry on.
How will mask enforcement be accomplished, particularly in the classroom? If an instructor reminds the student to put on a mask and the student refuses, should the instructor dismiss the student, call the campus police, cancel class, or continue teaching?
I'd like to ask our provost to comment on this. This is a complicated one, and certainly I know we have a group that's working on that. So Provost Johnson, can you comment on this?
I'm happy to. This is one of the places where our plans are not yet complete. Let me say that first, we hope that we successfully develop a culture in which students and all of us recognize that we need to follow these health measures to protect the community. President Cartwright talked about the communication campaign. There's going to be a lot of effort on this front. This is an attempt at social norming, which was largely successful when the campus went tobacco-free. Secondly, the policy that's being finalized will have us use the ordinary channels of discipline for noncompliance. That's for students and staff and faculty alike. But we don't yet have a complete answer for this question. One of the task forces is looking at how to address this, even down to a script of what a faculty member might say or do. I know that when I started as a faculty member, I would have found this quite difficult without guidance. So we don't have a complete answer. We will have a complete answer before the fall begins.
Will faculty be required to wear a mask the entire time they're teaching face-to-face if students are 6 feet away from the speaker or the faculty? Some faculty teach 6 hours a day. Can that be addressed when scheduling classes?
So the short answer is yes, everybody's going to be required to wear a mask in those environments. But I'd also like to ask Dr. Dyken to comment on wearing of the mask under those conditions and what might be possible, and maybe Provost Johnson can add something also.
Sure. So, one of the essential principles to containing COVID is face coverings. If we can all wear face coverings when we're in proximity to others within that 6 feet, we'll reduce the epidemic and reduce spread and threats to others. So it's really important. And so, our principle is that we are all going to wear masks when we're, near others, when we're in that 6 feet. So it has to be achieved even for those that are teaching, for long stretches. I guess I would imagine they may have opportunities to take breaks and when they're not in proximity to others, to remove their mask. That's what I do presently in the health center. I'm not wearing my mask now, but I may be in the clinic space for a long period of time and be wearing my mask. So I would look for creative opportunities like that to get a little break from the mask. But make sure you're wearing the mask when you're in proximity to others. It's the biggest, most important principle that we have for containing COVID.
How will housing, food service, the library, walkways, and other non-classroom spaces be made safe?
There's a number of things happening here, and I'll also ask Vice President Yas to comment on this too. But we are going to do extra work, right? We're going to have one-way walking routes. We're going to have additional hand sanitizing, touchless hand sanitizing around the entire campus. We'll also look at some of the upgrades and shared spaces to make it easier for students to have access to such, at least such necessary things. And I know that Mary Beth and her team have been working on this too, so I'd ask her to actually comment more in terms of those specific spaces.
So I think I heard most of the spaces. Housing, for sure, we are certainly reducing occupancy some in terms of providing mostly singles and the option for doubles. We'll be reducing, we will not be allowing visitation from people not in housing. And we will be identifying traffic patterns in common spaces. The Rec and Wellness Center, for instance, is working on plans to space between machines. They'll close certain areas that they don't feel are safe, try to do more outside. But we're not giving up on providing service and engagement for students. Study spaces will have the same type of distancing. So every chair, every seat will not be filled because we'll be wanting to do the distancing that has been discussed, the library as well. We'll probably look at other spaces that haven't normally been used as study spaces to make sure that the campus community has enough space to come and do studying in a private or a quiet space. Did I cover most of that, Stephanie? Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah.
The only other thing I would add, Stephanie, is we are going to try to follow the ambassador type program that Disney Springs uses, where there are people continuing to remind everybody about what are the best practices. And all of this will only be successful if we actually all take the responsibility to follow the guidelines and to physically distance, to walk in certain directions, and to follow the guidelines that are going to be in place when we're on campus.
Will the cleaning and other policies be consistent in the research park offices, the Connect campuses, and other spaces that UCF controls?
So yes, and the short answer to this one is yes. Of course, they will be asked to follow our guidelines. We don't. So the face coverings and all of those will be the same. Cleaning, we don't actually, and I will actually ask our COO, Vice President for Administration, Misty Shepherd, to comment on this, but we don't actually have the cleaning staff in those facilities. That's actually done separately, but our expectation is that they would meet our requirements.
Yes, President Cartwright, that's correct. We don't manage those facilities. They're owned by the foundation, and the foundation contracts with CBRE, and they hire the custodial and cleaning staff and maintenance staff. But there's a task force that includes our counterparts in Research Park to make sure that we're consistently applying what we do on campus to what we're doing in the Research Park. And so most of the same measures are in place in all of those spaces that house our UCF support faculty.
Thank you.
Will a transparent GIS-based website of UCF COVID statistics be constructed, including the same data as on national and local GIS-based websites? The Florida Department of Health and the Orange County websites are not specific to UCF and our spread rate may be much different from theirs. We would also want to see the number of active cases, tested positive and not yet tested negative or died, and statistics for groups such as specific classes, locations, or departments.
The Department of Health certainly will continue to work with us, and they will notify us of any positive cases, and we will actually also know about positive cases. And our plan is to continue to be as transparent as possible in terms of the number of cases that are within our community. And we will publish that, and we will put it there. The level to which we can go into the details that you're asking about, we have to take privacy, medical and also student privacy requirements into account as we actually put out information about the cases. But we will make sure the community understands what cases we have.
How will we handle quarantines and illnesses among faculty or students in face-to-face classes? So in the event that a faculty member in a face-to-face class becomes ill and colleagues are fully loaded, will we use adjuncts, promote GTAs to instructor of record, combine sections, and recall that faculty and students can become ill even if they're not on campus?
Yeah, I'd like to ask the provost to talk about this because I know he's been in discussion with the faculty senate, and with others, our deans and others. So, Provost Johnson.
Sure. First, let me refer to student illness. We are at least going to encourage faculty to plan their courses so that students that fall ill are able to continue through the semester. So, for example, attendance requirements have been discouraged. Important as they may be in normal times, they're just a burden now. We want students who think they might be sick to freely stay away. Faculty with a face-to-face component, we're encouraging to use a hybrid approach that can be available to students who either choose to be remote or because of health requirements really need to learn remotely. And for faculty who are listening, it's important to recognize that Tom Kavanaugh's group and the Division of Digital Learning has developed recommendations and approaches and has various training available on how to do this as easily as possible. And we're outfitting all of the classes this summer to make sure that there is technology available that's simple to use for courses that need this hybrid characteristic. About faculty in particular, first of all, faculty who are at elevated risk for severe illness from COVID will not be asked to be teaching classes on campus. They'll work remotely. And when faculty get ill, we have normal processes that will follow during the semester, which means typically that the department, the chair in the department helps figure out who might be able to pick up the rest of this course or during the time that the faculty member is ill.
For accessibility reasons, some students bring another person or service animal with them to class. Will they still be able to, and how will that affect spacing? Will any classroom have less wheelchair accessibility?
So we always have to make sure that we provide accessible classrooms for our students, and we will continue to have that practice. With some of the physical distancing requirements where we are able to space people apart 6 feet, that we hope will help us to be able to help wheelchairs navigate within those classrooms. We know there are some classrooms where physically we can't actually move necessarily the chairs or the desk, but we will continue to look at what other ways could we ensure there are additional spaces so that everybody is able to attend class, but also has the physical distancing. We also recognize that there's going to be some special cases where we need to think specifically about that individual student's needs. And we will take those on a case-by-case basis, and we will work with them. We'll work with the registrar's office, we'll work with the faculty that's involved. We have our student accessibility services, which will also help with that. And we're committed to making sure that everybody has the access in the way that they need.
So it may be that some people cannot wear a face mask or shields for health, sensory, mobility, or communications reasons. Some may have trouble breathing or cannot remove a face covering without assistance. If faculty or other staff were to approach a person without a face covering, we need to be careful not to assume the worst. How should people identify legitimate exceptions or alternatives to face coverings? Is there going to be a script or something like that that we can follow, or some training or other information to help us handle that situation?
Yeah, again, a valid concern, and one that we are taking into account, and we are looking into alternatives. So how can we make sure that if someone's not able to wear a face covering, that they have an alternative? And the important point to this, of course, is yes, we are going to think about how we can do that, how we can provide them with the ability to be here, and also how we make sure that we communicate that to the entire community, that there are people that may have to use alternatives to face coverings. So, thank you.
Will tuition and fees be adjusted in the fall, given possible changes in parking, housing, athletics, or class delivery method?
So we will not, we'll be keeping our fees the same in the fall. We are reopening, and all of the associated costs to the university will be there, and we'll be continuing to provide the education that we need to provide. Our tuition won't change and it won't be adjusted because we have to cover the cost of an education, which includes our faculty and the staff that support the university. So we won't actually add any distance learning fees onto classes in any way for those that are converted to a remote format for the fall. So we'll keep that in mind, but overall we will actually go forward with the fees and tuition the way they were.
Has there been any coordination with local school districts and what the school districts intend for their students? This may impact parents' ability to return to campus daily if childcare becomes an issue. UCF is a large employer in the area. Many faculty and staff will be affected by these decisions for our children. And I would say that also is true of some of our students.
Yeah, this is a question that certainly makes it clear that we have knights who care, people who care about others in this community, and that actually is what we should be thinking about. And I know that Maureen Binder, she has been working on this, and so I'll ask her to comment about details of working with the school districts.
Sure, thank you, President Cartwright. We know that Orange County Public Schools is working on 3 different plans for looking at what they are going to be doing for this fall semester. And we're monitoring that and keeping in touch with them. We're also looking at our faculty and staff and saying, well, if our faculty and staff are having problems with childcare because of the school district, depending on what they do, we will work with them to figure out if they can come back to campus, and if they can't come back to campus because of a childcare issue, because of dependence at home, then we're going to encourage our supervisors and managers to continue to let that employee work remotely if that's possible. And if not, we will work on that situation on a one-on-one basis.
One thing that we're also doing here is we will have a form that will soon be coming to everybody to help to collect information about whether whether our employees would be impacted by certainly by childcare or dependent care, and whether they're at high risk. And so we will be distributing that soon, and that will help us to then determine who can and what conditions, and then make some decisions that we hope will be, again, looking out for the best interests of our faculty, staff, and students.
And in some cases, it's already been distributed through your HR contact in your department or in your college. It's called an employee pandemic survey. So if you get that, if you've already gotten that, please don't be afraid. It will really help your supervisors, managers, your department chairs, and your deans plan for the fall semester.
There is a significant number of students who face equipment challenges when taking online exams. They reach out to faculty for technical support. Is there a point of contact for these issues?
Yeah, and in fact, Tom Cavanaugh is here today, and I'll ask him to actually talk a little bit more about what we are doing to help with this. Tom.
Yeah, thank you, President Cartwright. We know that that it was an issue for a lot of students, particularly in the spring when we migrated to 100% remote, especially for things such as webcams, for proctored exams, or for participating in Zoom sessions. And to a certain extent, that continued into the summer as it became hard just nationally to buy some of that equipment. So I would say a couple of things depending upon the issue that you're facing. If you are having a general problem while taking an exam, you should always, as a first step, contact WebCourses support. And there are a lot of ways to access that help, including from within WebCourses itself. There's a link. However, if it's much more of like an access issue, you don't have access to the actual equipment and you can't purchase it, I would encourage you to contact UCF Cares, who has been working with UCF IT and the Technology Product Center to provide loaner equipment to students so that they can have a webcam when they need it. However, I do know that there are limited supplies, so I would encourage you to be proactive in requesting that if you need it. And if for some reason that is not available to you, as a somewhat last resort, but it's proven to be effective, we do have some resources on how to turn your cell phone into a webcam. And those are linked from the Keep Learning website. It's sort of right at the top. I would encourage students to click on that. And there's a whole bunch of information, depending upon whether you're an Android or an iOS user, how to make that happen. So I would encourage students, depending upon what their issues are, to pursue any one of those avenues.
Final question from the prepared questions. How is UCF preparing for the possibility of virtual graduations going forward?
Yeah, as you know, the state university system of Florida has asked that we not have our summer graduation, but to do it virtually. And we are planning, of course, to do it virtually. We're not able to host then a traditional ceremony for our summer graduates until it's safe. We're working with student government to ensure that we think creatively about how we can celebrate all of our students' accomplishments on August 1. And we're hoping we can share that information as soon as possible. As with the spring virtual commencement, we want to make it very clear that we see this as a complement to the traditional ceremony. We still want to have a traditional ceremony for our students, and we don't want this to be the replacement. We're committed to rescheduling those traditional ceremonies as soon as we can. It's important to everybody. You've worked so hard to get to that stage that we want to make sure we have as good of an opportunity to celebrate that with you as possible. And no decisions have been made yet about the fall or spring, but for the summer, we are working with SGA to figure out an appropriate way to celebrate that.
All right, so for the remainder of our time, let's go to questions from the audience. Again, everyone listening and watching on Zoom, please use the Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom window to ask questions, and we'll share them with the panelists. You can also designate who your question's for if you have a particular person in mind. There's also an upvote option. So if you see someone has already asked your question, upvote it, and we'll give preference to the upvoted questions, followed by questions in the order they were asked. We will skip questions that have been asked or answered already or that are off topic. And there may be some straightforward questions that may be passed over and answered in the Q&A window, especially if they're particularly specific. And so you'll find those in the answered tab. So Stephanie, do you want to ask the first question?
Of course. So our first question is, please provide us insight into whether there will be potential furloughs as we need to plan our family budgets around UCF. Some of us have found ourselves now to be the sole breadwinners for our family.
Yeah, we are in the process of looking at our budgets for next year. We don't have guidance currently from the state in terms of what our budget will look like for next year. So it's difficult for me to to say one way or another what will actually happen. We do know that the state revenues are down, and we're probably projecting that they will be down. And so we will have to be thinking about our budgets next year. But right now, it is too early for us to say specifically whether there will be. There could be, but it's unclear at this particular time. It will depend on the enrollment for this spring, for the summer, enrollment for the fall and spring. There's a lot of aspects that come into what we will have to do in terms of our employment.
The second question has to do with the situation surrounding racism on campus. And I'll take it because it's such a highly voted question. What is the status of the investigation with Dr. Nagy?
So I will take the first attempt at that. Certainly, we continue to, if there's any complaints, any activity that comes forward, we continue to forward those and continue the inquiry around those topics. Once we have completed that inquiry, and if it goes to investigation, then we will make appropriate actions. But currently, we're still in the process of going through that process. And I know that's frustrating for a lot, but we have a lot of comments that we are following up on, and we will continue to follow up on. I don't know if the provost or Rhonda Bishop would like to add anything to that.
That's the situation as I understand it.
I think you covered it very, very well. And, we continue to review any concerns that have come in. And for individuals who've given detailed concerns, we're reaching out to them and having conversations to get more information.
Could you please reconsider prioritizing FTIC students, as 4,000 level courses are more difficult and are not meant for online instruction? The only reason I have heard to support this is that freshmen need to transition. However, we all are transitioning, and this isn't much of a normal semester anyways. Many of us upperclassmen students have leases that we cannot break, so making out classes online is really putting in a financial uncomfortable situation. How are we supposed to prepare for grad school and network?
This one is probably mine.
Probably the provost. I'm happy to answer it, but I think it'll be better for the provost to answer it.
Thank you. This question has grown out of a fairly poor communication from me. The actual charge to the colleges is to think about which courses can be on campus, should be on campus, given the requirement of social distancing, but and which should be online. The actual priority that was given to them is to ask the question, what is the best way to have a high quality course? For some courses, that really needs to be on campus, and the faculty, the programs, and the colleges understand that, and that's regardless of level. We then ask them, if you have courses that can be offered online at very high quality because they've already been developed as full online courses with fully trained instructors, please have them online. And then we have a limit of size of classes, but then the final sort of tiebreaker priority is the question that's being asked here. We ask them to then, as a final priority, indeed, to give weight to courses that are taken by new freshman students, FTICs, first time in college, for the reason that the questioner understood, which is that the experience of being in a campus is a very important part of what helps a new college student persist, progress, and succeed in college. And it's not to say that others don't have challenges. And I do think you'll see when the course registration system is updated, which we anticipate to be July 1st, that there will be courses at all levels and all colleges with a campus, on-campus teaching, some online. So it's not as simple as us saying, make it the freshman courses. That was one of the considerations.
Is there a clear date when employees will be expected to return to on-campus work, regardless of whether or not work can be completed remotely?
So I'll ask Maureen to comment on this too, but in terms of actual date, what we're talking about is June 22nd, when we can bring additional people back to the campus. We've already started, as you saw earlier, with some of our researchers, faculty and others coming back earlier. Administrators came back a little over a week ago. And now we are in the process of working through who is coming back when. And in the way that we want to do this is a discussion around with the staff and all of our employees and their supervisors that's taking place. And with the additional guidance that right now we're at 30% occupancy, we're moving to 50%. And that also influences when people will be coming back. It is a staged process coming back to the campus, and it will happen through a discussion. And one of the things that's taken into account is whether people can effectively work remotely also. Maureen, is there something else you'd add to that? You're muted, sorry.
Sorry about that. I think you did a really good job. It's a phased approach, and I think most important thing is if you can continue to do your job remotely in an effective way, is it necessary for you to come back to campus just because to be on campus? If you can do your job remotely, your supervisor should be flexible and allow you to do your job remotely. Key is, can you do it effectively? Because the more people who are off campus and can do their job effectively, the safer everybody else who can't do their job effectively stays. So that's really key. And we talked about the safety and well-being of our campus community. We want to keep our campus community safe. So that is a very key point. We're going to ask you all to be flexible, to take personal responsibility. That's very key. And I think, we're in a very different situation than we've ever been on this campus. And we all need to think differently about how we do our jobs. Every situation is different. I don't have a cookie cutter answer for anybody. And I think we all need to think out of the box. And we're seeing how it goes. So we have a date, June 22nd. We have another date in mind. We have to see how it goes. And that's really my answer.
Can't see anything. My computer is completely frozen. I'm sorry, guys.
Sorry, I'm hearing, I don't know. Are we okay to go on?
I believe that Anthony unmuted accidentally.
Stephanie, go ahead.
Have you planned anything for the international students who are stuck in their countries? U.S. embassies and international flights are closed, and that is why we are concerned, because if fall semester becomes face-to-face, and if we won't be able to return to U.S., we might lose our I-20. There's also a problem for new faculty that have been hired, but who are out of the country now.
So I know this has been a discussion, and we've been thinking about it. And I'd ask, I don't know if the provost or if it's Maureen that's more appropriate on this one, but I know we have been discussing this.
I can say what I know. It's not a very complete answer. We didn't think to bring somebody from our global UCF office to this. This is a national, international problem in all directions from all countries. We obviously can't do anything about consulates being closed elsewhere or people being unable to get visas back into the US or in the other direction. I know so what I do know is that some of the graduate programs in particular are thinking hard about how to offer remote instruction in ways they might not otherwise have done because they have significant numbers of international students. I've heard less about the consequences for our undergraduate students. We'll have to follow up, I think, on that later.
And just to add to that, we are talking to other schools across the country. Everybody is having the same problem. We have another meeting, I think Provost Johnson scheduled for Friday, to talk more about this. We've been seeking some guidance, and we have a little bit, but we certainly don't have all the answers right now. We know it's something we have to solve pretty quickly. It's high on our priority list, but we just don't have all the answers right now.
And I'd like to ask if Vice President Klonoff, if she has anything else to add to this.
Thank you, President Cartwright. We've been working with the programs on how they might, for incoming students, how they might defer admission at least one semester or even 2 semesters, particularly for those students who are getting fellowships. We are also looking at ways in which programs might facilitate that by using some of their funds to pay fees, so which would give us the ability to waive both out-of-state tuition and tuition for students who we anticipate will be coming in the spring. So I think for incoming students, I think it's a little bit clear. For returning students, there's still some questions about what we can do legally with respect to paying their stipends, particularly if they're in another country. There's certainly some countries where, for example, we're not allowed to do that at all, or there are certainly some countries where it's going to be a problem with respect to export control. But there's interesting controversy. I just came from another meeting among graduate deans, and half the graduate deans, their lawyers told them they could, and the other half the graduate deans, their lawyers told them they couldn't. So we're still, I think, trying to get the correct answer about paying current students who are TAs and who are home in their home country.
Will students get a refund for summer parking permits?
I will ask our Vice President for Administration, Misty Shepherd, to answer this one. I know she's answered this at several other forums, and so I'll ask her to do that.
Thanks. Yes, it is one of the most frequently asked questions up there with, cleaning protocol, and understandably so. And so we are listening, and we understand, and are sensitive to the fact that, with everybody in financial, whatever position they're in from this, that we are really being thoughtful and mindful. For students and the summer parking decals, if you purchased an annual, then summers is considered free because you pay for both semesters and you get the rest of the year. As far as the transportation fee, we waive the transportation fee, the per credit hour. At this time, we are not moving forward with student refunds for summer. Unfortunately, we'll continue to look into it, but it's kind of across the state decision on some of the things that we refund. But we are looking at other measures, and it's important to kind of understand that the infrastructure that the decals pay for is an ongoing infrastructure that we benefit, whether or not we're here for one semester or when people come back next semester. Paying for that infrastructure and upkeep is an ongoing expense. And for the transportation fees, we've kept fees flat for 9 years now. The decal fees have been flat for 8 years. So that's also being mindful of making sure that the costs associated are spread out in a way that we can continue to maintain that, no increases in the parking fees and decals.
When will schedules in MyUCF be updated to show if they're moving to online instruction versus remaining as in-person classes?
I mentioned this earlier. July 1 will be for sure. They'll be there, and I don't know if the provost will say anything different than that date. But
I have said we'll be able to pull it off by July 1st.
Even if you take all the precautions, making fall face-to-face will definitely increase COVID-19 because gyms, hallways, campus restaurants, and basically everywhere on campus will get affected. why don't you wait one more semester online? Why do you take the risk of opening campus? Do you think financial stability of the university is more important than students' health?
This, if you look at what is happening, the entire state is reopening, and we are looking at how do we continue to do this in as safe a way as possible. The financial is part, it's not a big part of this decision. What is a big part of the decision is we do have a number of students, and our student survey that was conducted shows that there's a number of students who want to come back to campus. And we are trying to figure out how do we do that in a way that allows them to come back to campus, especially, and I would ask Stephanie if she can comment on this. I know that there are a number of our students who want that on-campus experience, and they want it this fall. And what we're trying to do is figure out a way to do that while ensuring the safety of our community. And that does mean that we're trying to think through exactly what happens with the gyms. What happens in those spaces? Do we open them? Do we not open them fully? Those are still things that are being decided. The restaurants, how the details of how we ensure safety during those routing of people through them. We're trying to follow the best practices that we have out there in a way that we protect all of our community as much as possible. And I think if we all work together on this, I'm hoping that we don't, that we can get through this without seeing those increases.
Yes, Dr. Cartwright, I think you really have said it all. We, as student government, we released a survey that about 5,000 students, I believe, took, and most of them did say that they would like to return to on campus and kind of do the norm that we've had in the past. But however, a lot of them were concerned about the guidelines and how the university would set those guidelines. But definitely we've heard a lot of feedback, and a lot of students do want to come back to campus. And then this goes to my next question. How will shuttles and other transportation be affected by these changes, specifically for off-campus housing?
I'm going to ask Vice President Ihas to actually talk about this one, because it's complicated in terms of, I know we're working with our partners on this, and so I don't know if a decision has been made there yet. Oh, you're muted.
Dr. Cartwright, I think that actually Misty Shepherd has a better sense of the transportation and shuttles. So I want to just send it to her if you don't mind.
I don't mind at all, and I apologize.
It's all right.
This is me showing that I'm actually new and I don't know exactly where certain things are, and I apologize.
You've had your plate full. Yeah, so when students return to campus, we intend for the shuttle services to be fully operational. We monitor the ridership so that we can adjust accordingly if it seems like some of the routes we don't need to run as frequently because there are no students on them. But through the fall, the shuttle services will return fully operational.
Okay, with news of 3 out of 10 football players testing positive, is UCF prepared to handle the same proportion of students returning to campus testing positive? So that would be about 5%. If so, how? And related, the reason the football players were identified was because the university had a system in place to test those individuals before it spread to others. If we're not planning on testing faculty and staff, how can we be sure UCF employees feel safe returning to campus?
So I just want to make sure that everybody understands it's 3 out of 60. I think you may have misspoke. At least I may have misheard you say 3 out of 10.
I'm sorry, 3 out of 60. My apologies.
5% is correct. 5% is correct. And we have had that conversation about the fact that, you know, if that is representative, of course, that's a small sample size, and so you can't extrapolate. But if you look at athletes around all of the universities that have been reporting and have gone public with their numbers, there are in the percentage range that are affected, which means that could extrapolate to our general population. We are planning on testing, and what I want is Dr. Dyken to talk about what we need to do is make sure that we have mechanisms in place where people can properly recognize if they are becoming sick, and then they can actually test as soon as possible. And that's what we're going to be putting in place. So people will have the opportunity to be tested. It's just we're not going to test everybody right away. But if people, I'll let him talk about the details of how we actually decide. But there is going to be an app. There's going to be some other things that help us all, and I will be using that app too, to make a decision about whether we should be tested or not. Dr. Dyken.
Well, we're putting together a very innovative approach, Dr. Cartwright, for public health measures and COVID. One of them is the app, and with UCF IT and our mobile solutions group, we've created a beta app that can be utilized by all faculty, staff, and students, which screens for symptoms of COVID according to the CDC listed COVID symptoms, in addition to recent travel or exposure to persons with COVID. If persons screen positive for that, and they'll be expected to do it daily, then it will help to link them up with services so they can be tested. But it's more than just the app, because we are planning to, for instance, test all our residents in the dormitories or residence halls. All athletes are being tested. We're planning to do surveillance with some intermittent testing of other groups as well as that. And with our contact tracing, if there is a positive case, we may identify persons who have been exposed, and we'll get those persons tested as well. In addition, we want to make testing readily available for anyone that's interested. And right now, you can get tested quite easily. And a good thing about that is there's no cost. It's covered by insurance or by a federal grant. So anyone that needs to get tested can be tested through our drive-through services that we're providing. So we're creating this matrix, and it's very consistent with best principles in public health. We vetted with the Florida Department of Health. I think it's going to be an outstanding approach to diagnose persons early and contain any outbreak.
How would COVID-19 affect the football season?
I wish our athletic director was on to answer that one. This one is complicated in that we have a lot of different entities involved, right? It's us, the University of Central Florida, but it's also the AAC and it's also the NCAA. And we need to work with all of those entities to think about what then does the fall look like. We will also have to pay attention over the next few months in terms of where are there potential changes in the number of cases and what's happening in other areas where our team might play, right? So there are all of those things that are going to be taken into account. There's no decision that's been made yet. The only decision that has been made is that we've brought our athletes, some of them, the returners, have come back, and we'll be bringing additional ones back in next week or the week after that are the new student athletes. But we don't know yet exactly how it might be impacted. At this time, we move forward as if we will be playing in the fall, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to.
How about students who have roommates that catch the coronavirus? Has UCF planned for that?
Yes.
Very bad. Sorry.
Yes. Yes, we definitely have planned for that for our on-campus housing. We have about 65 rooms that are set aside that if an individual does show up as positive, that individual and we'll be going to a quarantine space. Roommates, of course, would be exposed, and there will be not that many students who have a roommate because most of our rooms will be singles. But as Dr. Dyken has mentioned, there will be a tracing activity and to try to let people know that they need to, be concerned in case they have caught it. So yes, we have a protocol in place that will move folks immediately to a quarantine and support services around them. So yeah.
Let me follow up on that one. What about students who are in non-university housing who do have roommates?
Well, I'm hopeful that our promotion and education and training provides the same type of care to all of our students, whether they're off campus or on campus. We do not have information right now that private housing has set aside quarantine spaces. So the advice would be, do you need to move back to a place that, might provide you that isolation? That kind of discussion will have to occur.
Will the university make all finals online since we are to return home after Thanksgiving break?
Yes, but you don't have to return home. So let me just make it clear that we made a decision to move the last week of classes and exams online following the Thanksgiving break. Not to send people away, but because there are some indications, some suggestions by epidemiologists that flu and COVID could flare up in the late fall and early winter. So this is a way to be cautious, to make sure that people can plan ahead of time. For example, how to conduct their exams, what to do with the last week of classes, and not repeat something like what we had to do at spring break. So the housing will be open, all the campus facilities will be open, but the exams and the last week of classes will be offered remotely.
This is the final question. What plans do we have in place for homecoming week? Will Spirit Splash happen?
That seems like such a long time into the future. We don't have any specific plans yet that I know of. I'm sure there are people working on that, and so I would ask if someone would like to comment on what planning has taken place, because I know there are groups working on this, and I'm sure most people want to try to have Spirit Splash if at all possible. So if others are willing to comment on those, I'd really appreciate it.
You're muted, Mary Beth.
Okay, sorry. We know that traditions are very, very important to our campus, and our team and the student involvement is really looking at ways to provide some celebration to keep those traditions going. But safety will need to be the #1 guiding point for whether we can do it. And if you think about Spirit Splash, there's quite a few people close together in the water. And we may not be able to have it that way. We may have to show a film of, Spirit Splashes from the past, but we're going to celebrate some way or another. Homecoming, there's alumni, students are planning for events for homecoming. We won't maybe be able to do it the same way, but we're gonna do everything we can to keep our traditions alive safely.
I don't know why, but I was thinking about this earlier today, probably because I look out at the fountain. But I was trying to figure out, is there a way that we do it virtually and all of us participate in our own little Spirit Splash with water that we're in together, and we do it all online. It would be an interesting experiment to see if we could actually do it. But I do think we need to do something. The important thing about this is we need to do something to continue to build community. This is what this is about. It is about us being together. And if we can't do it in person, we have to figure out ways to do more of these things virtually. So I'm looking forward to creativity. And I'm not sure, Stephanie, if I stepped and you were going to say something, and I apologize if you were, but I would love to see the creativity from the students. And so Stephanie, please, I'll look forward to what you're going to do.
Yeah, of course. Of course, student government, as well as the Office of Student Involvement, will be coming up with creative ways on how we can kind of get the entire student body involved in the fall, especially during homecoming week. So we're excited to release those plans. And this concludes our time for questions. Regrettably, we did not get to every question. We will capture these questions and make every effort to answer these in follow-up communications. President Cartwright, do you have any final comments?
I just want to thank everybody for being involved. This is a trying time for so many reasons. And we know that we're asking so much of all of you. We're asking you to do what you've always been doing and now to do more, and to think about things differently, and to think about what this institution becomes during this, and how do we protect each other, and to think about community. And we are asking you to not just, when you wear a face covering, you're not just wearing that. It's not to protect you as much as it is to protect the community. And that is who we are. We care about each other. We care deeply about each other. And we need to always have that in our minds. Every time we participate in anything, moving forward in the fall, we continue to try to help this institution to be the model of how this might be possible, and how we can continue to protect everybody as much as possible, recognizing that all of us have to be flexible. Our managers, our supervisors, the department chairs, everybody needs to be flexible and think about what's in the best interest of all of the people at this institution. The university is not about bricks and mortar. A university is about people. And we need to protect our people, and we need to do this as safely as possible. And we will continue to monitor very closely everything that's going on. And we need you to be ready that if plans change, which they can, that you are ready for those changes, and we're ready to move forward, and we'll move forward together. So thank you for being with us on this, and thank you for everything you do.
Thank you, President Cartwright. And I want to specifically thank your transparency, the transparency of all the leadership, Provost Johnson, Dr. Dyken, and everybody. When I'm meeting with faculty senate leaders from other institutions, they envy our access to what's going on and the level of input that we've had. And so I want to thank all the panelists today and also the audience for your questions. You can continue to share feedback at covid19questions@ucf.edu. You can find additional information on the coronavirus website, ucf.edu/coronavirus. The Faculty Senate will consider both the plan that we've discussed today and campus response to racism tomorrow from 12 to 2. See facultysenate.ucf.edu for the live stream link. We also want people to be aware of the Board of Trustees discussion on this topic on June 18th from 8:30 to 1:30 p.m. So go to bot.ucf.edu for more information there, and we'll post those links in the graphic that ends this program. You can find a recording of this event on UCF's YouTube page.
And this concludes the return to UCF Virtual Conversation. Have a great day, everyone.